Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Di Giovanni. I am Associate Professor of Translation and Accessibility at the University of Macerata in Italy, and I am currently the President of ESIST, the European Association for Studies in Screen Translation.
And hi, everyone. This is Tiina Holopainen. I'm at the University of Turku, teaching there, teacher in multilingual translation studies, and I'm part of the board of ESIST. And welcome, Yves Gambier.
Well,
thank you for joining this interview. You will be able to introduce yourself in many ways, we hope, during this interview. We are very happy to have you in this interview. This is a part of a series of interviews that ESIST is conducting with people who started cooperation internationally in Europe first, in both training and research in audiovisual translation, AVT, which then gradually led to the foundation of ESIST. So Yves, you are certainly one of the activists, early activists, and continue to be so on even on a more global level in both training and research in AVT, along with all the other work that you've been doing in translation studies at large. So what got you involved in AVT in the first place, and what were your first steps in international cooperation?
Well, first of all, thank you. But first of all, I would like to say I have always been keen on movies from very early. And I think I started to be more involved about the problem of language and interrelation between different cultures and languages in audiovisual translation when I was about 14 already, because in my hometown, there was, how do you say, a Danish cultural house where they show films. And we discuss not only the films, the contents of the films, but also how to transfer the language, especially from Denmark and from Sweden. And that was in France. So I never forgot that period of time, because it made me aware that watching, for instance, Bergman's films in Swedish is not the same as in French, or watching Fellini in Italian is not the same as in English, for instance. And at that time, it was something very new for me. On the other hand, when I was a student, I was always aware that our culture was not anymore based on literature, even if I was a student in literature. But I was aware that we were going to more and more audiovisual culture. And I was very much under influence of Marshall McLuhan, which published a book in 1964, Understanding Media. And at the university at that time, we discussed very deeply about what is a new culture, what kind of cultures we are going to, and so on. And then another thing which is very important, but in relation to what I've just said, I organized a cinematheque in my hometown for 2 years, and we show old films, and we make them not silent, because at that time we had an orchestra, free jazz orchestra in the room, and underground American films and things like that for 2 years. It was a lot of work, but I enjoy very much about doing these kind of things. And then I moved to Finland, or to Sweden, and then to Finland, and I became more aware about subtitling, because Finland was using subtitling. And in Turku, we started the course on subtitling in 1978 with Marshall Aini. It was a very small module, 1 credit for 20 hours and very few exercise. I think mainly it was to make students to practice their English, not to do audiovisual translation, in fact. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, little by little, and that was organized within the Department of English in Translation Studies. And I became aware, and I talked more with Marceline, and she realized that the English department was not so keen to do more, but I was keen to do more. And with students, we started to become aware about what's going on in Europe about training. So with EVOR, for instance, in 93, I think, we organized a survey about the different schools in Europe. And also the need of Yle, the public TV channel in Finland, what kind of people do they need? So we built up little by little something. And I don't know, things went very fast. And in 93, 94, I set up already the first bibliography. And there were not so many works at that time, but I got the second edition already in 97. And in 94, I have some notes here. I make a presentation in a conference in a Basque country, and nobody else talk about audiovisual translation, but the Basque people were very aware because of their own needs to discuss that. So I think that was a very challenging presentation in that respect. And then came June 95 conference in Strasbourg. So let's say that between the end of the 80s and the beginning of 90s, things went quite fast. But when we did the survey in 93, we did 3 different surveys. One in 93, I think, one in 94, with the help of the FIT committee of training.
Media committee.
No, training and qualification. That was the first one. And then later on with the FIT media committee. And again, we tried to find out what is existing and where and why. And well, the results were not very good in a way, but we get the good feedback. But I realized people mix a lot when you talk about audiovisual translation. Some people talk about the news, some people talk about only cinema, forgot about TV and things like that. So I realized little by little that something has to be a little bit mapped in different ways. So maybe we can have a better view. And then come the work by the Josephine Dryers and people from the European Institute of the Media, where they talk about translation. And little by little, there was some kind of convergence between what we were doing in Finland, what we were doing in Düsseldorf, and what people were doing here and there, but on a very limited level. But we get together. And when we organized the 95 conference, I must say it was very difficult to organize it. Not about the logistics, because we get a very nice support from the Council of Europe, from UNESCO, from FIT, but there were so few researchers, so few scholars, that it was difficult to invite anybody. But anyway, it works, and we get very good discussion, and we get the support from the Commission. In 95, I think that was the first time the European Commission reported on the remote interpreting, the use of video for interpreting, and the problem of interpreting, not translation, and so. And also, not long ago, I mean, I can tell you, on the last 18th of June, I got an email by Chiara Russo. I suppose Elena knows her. And then she said, because she asked me for a paper, I gave her a paper, and I remind her about June 95, that some people in Strasbourg give a report about the first experiment on the European Commission and so on regarding multilingual video conference. And then she said, and I did not expect that kind of feedback, she said, "You were there, thanks a lot. I am very grateful to you for the profound and far-reaching reflection and stimuli you gave us at that time." So you see, sometimes you do something, but you never know what will be the impact. And I never knew that from 95 on, audiovisual translation will be on the rail.
Mm, mm,
It's incredible.
mm.
Yes.
So you simply started out of interest and started acting and contacting with people, speaking with people. I think it sounds very, very important, this survey that you did.
Yeah, but also, let's say, for instance, I remember, and Josephine can confirm, between 98 and 2002, I think, we were invited by the European TV and Film Forum, a very posh, top manager organizing TV programs, exchanging TV programs. And they organized a forum for many, many years, but they never talk about translation. So we were invited to talk about the challenge of translation on TV. And we were invited for, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. And that was also very interesting, that suddenly the broadcasting company became aware that something has to be maybe coordinated, not only for training, but to how to organize the work. And I think that was also a challenge. So the challenge came from other schools, from association, from the FID, from the Council of Europe, from this European TV Forum, and so on. So we were, in a way, the ball was running.
Wow. So how did it then come about that you started talking about founding an association like ESIST?
I think the idea came from Wales. And I don't know, because these people did not have regular programs. They were not regular people teaching at university. They were invited for further education course. And they decided to organize something in relation to the language policy of Wales. So it was not mainly because of translation, but because they wanted to promote the Welsh language. So in a way, they got money, they get the support from EU, and we gathered together in, I think, I don't remember the dates now, but in second half of the 90s, and in Lampeter, we went there, and in 2 or 3 years, we decided that we have to make an association if we want to continue something, mainly because these people from Lampeter did not have a steady position. So they were never sure that how it will go on, and still they wanted something to be strong, to continue.
And association is always something official.
Yes.
You can apply money for that and so
Yeah.
on. Okay, yes.
And since we have done the survey about training, about years before, we knew how to share some kind of information. And what was the problems? Because as I said, a lot of people did not understand audiovisual in the same way. Mm-hmm. So I think it was necessary to talk about in different lines. Yeah. I think Henrik, I'm not so sure, but I think Henrik Gottlieb was there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he will have told about those.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Can you recall other names, perhaps, people who were especially active, or what was very important was that there were so many different stakeholder groups that were early on discussing in contact with each other?
Well, I think Josephine Dryers was one key person, even if she was not from the audiovisual translation field as such, but she knew a lot about the media, and I think she was the one who made the bridge between us and the European TV Forum and so on. Then Jan Ivarsson was a key person, even if he was not part of the university, but Sweden is not far from Finland, and I think in 94, I tried to find out why Finland became a subtitling country, or so-called subtitling country. And I was always sent back to Sweden. So I tried from Sweden to get contact, and then I got with Jan Ivarsson. And since Jan was not part of university, he did not know really how to go. And then we started to, later on, I think in 96, the Berlin conference.
96, that was.
Yeah, I think it's the first one. I think so. I'm not so sure about that. I think it has been, and then we are very clear. That was very interesting. Very small group. Maybe we were 3 or 4 people, plus the organizer in Berlin. But let's say, what's her name? Mary Keller was one. I don't remember if Jan was there, but anyway, we have to make a very strong decision at that time. And sometimes you don't really know what you are doing. But anyway, first of all, do we do it regularly or not? Mm. Secondly, do we do it only academic, or do we try to bridge academy and the industry? And we make it so that it will be a bridge between. And if we do so, then we have to organize it at the same place every now and then, every 2 years, because the industry does not travel as we do, changing place from now and then. If you have a steady place, then the industry will know that every year something is organized. And if they are interesting, they will come again and again. So that's why we never move away from Berlin, but we remain. And I think that's why also the industry has been participating regularly.
Yes.
And I think that was a very good move, I must say. It was, again, not sure that things will go. But again, we got some contact with a translation agency in Denmark, in Sweden. So we knew that we could start something.
Yeah, perhaps I can join in this conversation and, jump in with my question too, because we know that audiovisual translation studies have had a beginning that you've been tracing so far that has seen a lot of practitioners involved. So we know that at the beginning, audiovisual translation studies as a field of study was born out of a reflection on the practice in several countries and among different people. And then scholars like yourself made a difference in setting up a discipline, a field of study that has been growing so much ever since. And that's what I would like you to possibly focus on now. How can you retrace the evolution of audiovisual translation as a field of academic study over these past 30 years? What are the main landmarks or, the main developments that you can see? And of course, you've contributed to most of them or all of them.
I think the Berlin conference was very important because that was a regular place to meet over people from different settings, from different institutions. And little by little, we built up something as a kind of community. And I think that was very important. And then, on the other hand, when we talk about training, since more and more people were interested in training, then we have to define what does it mean to train audiovisual translators. And some people wanted to do something, very abstract, but we always said, no, there should be some practice behind. You can't, and don't forget at that time there were no software. So you have to do heavy work. And I think that's why we have to be very careful about it's not a question of language. You don't do audiovisual translation just to improve the command of foreign languages. It's something more specific. And we have to convince people that if you start something, you have to get in touch with the industry in some respect, industry or TV broadcasting company and so on. So I think we have been strong about that right from the beginning. And it might be because myself, I have been working with Marcel Heine, who was a practitioner from the public TV broadcasting in Helsinki. Maybe without such contact, maybe I would have been a little bit out of the blue or somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, now that you say this, it's always been some kind of a drawback for audiovisual translation studies that it's still seen as a field where practice seems to be dominant instead of, just pure research. What do you think about this?
That's a challenging question. It's true. I mean, this is my feeling today. It's true that we tend now to be repetitive, to do a lot of case studies, to do a lot of things related to so-called problems. But I don't think we have improved very much, in fact, about the field as a scientific field. We are lacking theoretical background. I don't mean in translation. I think a lot of people, they know descriptive studies and so on. But in our field, for instance, lacking knowledge in semiotics, lacking knowledge in multimodality, even if a lot of people talk about multimodality, but I think we don't make a really fast progress on that. And like, for instance, a little bit about accessibility. I mean, it's a buzzword today, but I think people take it for granted, and they should maybe question the validity of this buzzword or concept and so on. And yes, I think it would be nice if people, but then again, that's a limitation when you work with practitioners. They work with what they know, they practice, but they have no time, no resources to look outside their own field. And even though some practitioners are in need, and they are aware of that. I remember not long ago from Yle, from Helsinki, people said, why don't we do a seminar on semiotics? And but again, the crisis that was before 2008, the crisis came, and then less money for training, and then the Yle outsource translation and so on. So it has never been organized. But it came sometimes at the point that they realized we cannot do further if we don't have more knowledge about something.
Yeah.
And,
although I tend to think, for example, that accessibility, which came later on into the framework of audiovisual translation studies, I think accessibility has brought into the picture new interdisciplinary avenues and opportunities, although sometimes quite radical, like all the psychological approaches and inclusive design and universal design. So I think we are also moving away from disciplines that were more related to audiovisual translation, like linguistic theories.
Yes, true. Yeah. But on the other hand, we should, I mean, this is quite interesting, this trend, and I agree with you about that. But on the other hand, the risk is that we go too far out from practice. And again, it's a kind of balance. And the way we work today, you work, because I'm not anymore at the university, but the way you work today at the university make it a little bit difficult now to keep contact with industry. Even if the university would like to have more cooperation, but the stress is so that it's impossible. But let's say, for instance, I'm thinking about multimodality. Multimodality, as far as I remember, has been used in audiovisual translation already in 2001. And in the last 20 years, I think we did not make really progress about the concept. We refer to, but that's it.
Yeah.
But I think what we are saying now, it's not only in audiovisual translation. I think this is a matter of fact in all translation studies.
Yeah.
And my fear now is that we all become hyper specialist in our narrow field. And even within audiovisual translation, some people specialize in a very specific mode of audiovisual translation. And I think that's risky things.
Yeah, I agree. I have one final question for you, which is very much related to what you've been saying so far, and especially at the beginning of this talk, you've mentioned training quite a few times and the importance of strengthening training and making it academic also, not just scattered classes or seminars, but something that has a status and it's recognized and it's well organized and it's systematic. And you've been a very prominent figure in all this, all over the world. Can you just retrace the history of training in ABT and tell us about your own contribution? We know that you've helped set up training courses all over the world. I remember Iraq, I remember Russia and China. So much to say.
I have always been very careful. I never design a program for the people because I don't know the context. And I think before you start new programs, not only you have to get in touch with the practitioner, like we said, of the industry, but you have to be aware about, for instance, institutional, financial, technical, pedagogical surrounding. Because, for instance, in Turku, it's very easy to change something in our program. But I remember, for instance, many years back when I went to Geneva, we talked about that, and they say then we discussed about what kind of strategy, and then they told me it will take 3 years to make a move. I said, my God, it's too far out. So I think I have been very careful not to hurt people, not to say what you should do, but to become aware that there are a lot of constraints before you make some change. I think I always insist more about what is our culture today. If you are convinced that audiovisual translation or audiovisual is a big part of our culture today, then go ahead, because you get the motivation. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that translation studies is still strongly based on literature.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what is very funny in a way, it's a lot of young people understand that. I mean, last time, for instance, one of the last presentation I did, it was in Marrakesh in Morocco. And the teachers were a little bit skeptical about all this, even if they asked me to talk about it. And because they thought literature is canonic things that people should know. But in the audience, I could see that the young people understood very much that it's what we are. We need to do work in our culture, which is audiovisual. And I take audiovisual in a broad meaning, including the internet and so on, video games and so on. And I think there may be also a clash between generations, between some teachers who get a goodwill to implement something, but then as soon as they get some breakdown, they withdraw and say, well, later on we can do that. But on the other hand, you have young people who are pushing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Tiina, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So closing our interview, you mentioned already some things, but perhaps at the end of the interview, the most important challenges of the industry, if you like to talk about that, and then of course the research on audiovisual translation, the two different things.
I think I can combine both of them. I think one of the challenge, and I have been repeating that for some times now, it's a pity that we still don't understand that media, audiovisual media or media in a broad meaning, is an international industry. Not only, I'm not thinking about Netflix only, it has always been already from the 80s. And I'm a little bit skeptical when I see that, for instance, the Finnish people study the Finnish subtitle, Italian people study Italian dubbing, forgetting that the media landscape is international. And when you sell a TV program, it's international. You already get some kind of translation there when you sell a program. You see, you have to adapt it and so on before you translate anything. And you have to format it in different ways and so on. And I think the scholars should realize that we are not working on within the national border. It has to be, especially in media, it has to be right away international and take into account what it means, especially for the distribution and the broadcast of different TV programs, video games, and films. And I think this is very important for me. So if you want me to conclude, I will say most of the people should think again and again, what do we mean by culture? I think too many people still have a national or nationalistic, if you want, view of culture. But culture is not so far now today, we are 2021, so far today within national state borders. I don't deny there is something which is national. I don't deny about that. But you cannot reduce translation and culture only on the national level. I mean, the young people, when they use social media, when they use anything in Germany, don't tell them that they are working only within the border of the state.
Mm. Yes, this is
I think this is very important to think about the concept of culture. And of course, we overuse it in translation studies, but I'm not so sure that we all share the same concept of culture. At least less and less sharing the same concept as many people.
Yeah, and the concept of culture itself is a changing one, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So,
luckily. In good and bad. Thank you very much. These are
my pleasure.
Ideas for the future research, but also in practice. It's very valid to think about the concept of culture. So thank you very much, Yves, for this interview. And we wish you all the best in whatever you do in your life, and hope to see you in some other context again.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you, Yves.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.